Okay, so the circuit below is a 3-bit up counter with T flip-flops. Assume that Q2, Q1, Q0 equals 0, 0, 0 initially. For flip-flops 0 and 1, explain what happens and why it happens at each of the 3 points Q0, the clock input to F flip-flop 1 and Q1 at each of the 3 time instants, the first active edge of the clock, second active edge of the clock, and the third active edge of the clock. Okay, so I think the easiest way to do this is to just kind of trace what's going to happen at the clock edges. So I have Q0, Q1, and Q2. And I'm also going to put in a little column for clock for Q1 and Q2, because the clock signal is not the clock. The clock signal is Q bar from the flip-flop before. So we're told that they all start at 0. So we can put that in. I'm going to start with Q0 because it's just a T flip-flop with the clock. So it'll be easiest to deal with. Its input is a constant 1. 1 toggles. That means every time the clock edge happens, we get to the active edge of the clock, it's going to toggle because the input is always 1. So at the first active edge of the clock, it'll be 1. At the next active edge of the clock, it'll be 0. At the next active edge of the clock, it'll be 1. And so this was for the first 3 time instants. Yeah. So that one was easy. Okay, so now let's pay attention to this is a little bit different because when we were looking at the input for the the D or the T, we were always paying attention to what the signal was from the time before, but the clock's not going to be like that. So at the first active edge of the clock, Q becomes 1. And when Q becomes 1, Q bar becomes 0. So right there, that's 0. So our clock is 0. And since the clock is 0, then nothing is going to happen because it's only going to change when the clock changes to 1. So we're not going to have a change here. Now, the next clock cycle, we have Q0 is 0, which means Q bar is 1. So our clock is now 1. Okay, so now something is going to happen. The clock is 1. We just reached an active edge, and it's a T flip-flop, and the input is 1. So the inputs are, all these are 1, so it's going to toggle. So it'll be 1. Now on the next cycle, Q0 or Q0 is 1. So that means Q bar is 0. So that means no change. Okay, so now let's look at this last one, I don't know that it's said to look at the last one, but I think we should. I think it'll help. Okay, so originally Q was 0, which meant that Q bar was 1, and since Q bar was 1, that meant our clock was 1, which means that we'll have a toggle. Now Q1 is 1, so Q bar is 0, so there'll be no change. And now Q1 is 1, so Q bar is 0, so there'll be no change. So we could say the clocks on flip-flop 1 and 2 are the complements of the output of the flip-flop before. So when the clock is 0, there's no change. When the clock is 1, it toggles. So that one's a little confusing, I think. Do y'all have like questions on it? Anything? Yes.
So the best way to go about it is just taking the first flip-flop and just going down.
That's what I think. That's the way I do it. I don't know if that's the best way, but it's the way I do it. Yeah, so because the first one is usually pretty easy, and then you have to go to it from there. And I think I did the next one the same way, so we'll see if I did. So, other questions? All right. Okay, so for the circuit below, what is the secret sequence of output values on consecutive clock pulses starting from Q2, Q1, Q0 equals 0, 0, 0 until reaching 0, 0, 0 again? So Q0, Q1, Q2, let me do it over here. Q0, Q1, Q2. Okay, so So Q0 is just a T flip-flop with an input of 1. And so on each clock cycle, it will toggle. So 1, 0, 1, 0, and we don't know when we're going to get back to 0, 0, 0 again, but we'll see. Okay, now Q1 is also just a T flip-flop with a clock and an input of 1, so it also is just going to toggle. So that's easy. So Q2 is the one that's tricky. So let's look at Q2. So Q2, on this one, the input is Q1. So the clock is 1, so it will toggle. On the next one, the clock is 0, so it won't toggle. On the next one, the clock is 1, so it will toggle. And on the last one, the clock is 0, so it won't toggle, and we're back to 0, 0, 0. And then on his solutions, he wrote these like this. With the Q2 first, and then Q1, and then Q0. But I did my columns like this because that was the order that it was here. It was easier for me to see it there. Just wrote them in a different order. So questions on this one before we get to the long one? All good? Anybody learning anything? Okay, good.